Good morning and welcome back to Collaboration Conversations. I'm your co-host, Regina Partain Bergman. My official co-host, Pearl Cox, is unable to be with us today, and we have an amazing guest co-host in her place this morning. I want to welcome to the program, um, Tony Guarnaccia. Did I say that right?
That was
Or get
perfect.
close? Did
No,
I
that
get
was great.
close?
That was great.
Tony is the head of growth at Castosity, where they're making podcasting profitable for hosts and guests. He has developed an amazing program, folks, an amazing platform. We're going to hear a little bit more about that today because really his work is all about collaboration. Right, Tony?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's really baked
Yeah.
into it from the beginning because I've found over the years that's the easiest way to grow.
Yes. So, Tony, welcome as our guest co-host this morning. And would you take a moment and tell folks a little bit about who you are, what you do, who you serve, and why?
Yeah, I've been in digital marketing in different ways, different facets for over 25 years, having worked with amazing companies like Google, like Ford Motor Company, like ADP. There's a whole list of companies like that. But also, kind of where my heart is at with small businesses. So having worked with over 10,000 small businesses over the years, and a lot of them, big or small, face the same challenges. And at the end of the day, a lot of times it's like, how do we grow and how do we grow profitably? So I've constructed a lot of tools, trainings, and templates and systems to help make that possible. In this season, I'm kind of focused on individuals within the podcasting space, both hosts, podcast hosts, and their guests. So really to make podcasting profitable on both sides of the chair.
Awesome. And folks, if you don't lip read or you couldn't see what's going on, I said, wow. Actually, it was a silent wow. That's the number of folks that you've helped. Incredible, Tony, and the number that you're helping now. Now, is there also an element to that for sponsors? Do I remember that correctly or incorrectly? Is there an element to your
Yes, yeah.
program for
So
sponsors?
absolutely. So I'm really focused on podcasts and other kind of broadcast type media. So even video, like we're on here today. But what I found is there's really three primary business models if you're a host, for instance. And the
Okay.
first one is to sell your own product and services. The second one is to sell someone else's product and services. But there's two ways to do that. One, they can pay you before they get a result, which is a sponsorship. So, they're paying you basically in faith that they're going to get some sort of result that they're looking for as
Right.
being a sponsor. The other model, which we're going to dig into deeper today, is where someone pays you after they get a result, which a lot of times becomes a joint venture partnership,
Right.
which a lot of times turns into affiliate revenue or commissions. And so that's kind of the third model. So the three, again, is your own product and services. And then the other two offshoots of that is someone pays you ahead of time, that's a sponsorship, or someone pays you after, that's affiliate revenue.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So tell us a little bit about the platform. It's fairly new on the market, right?
Yes,
Castosity.
correct.
Yes. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about it, how the functionality of that, if you
Yeah.
would.
So it's real simple. We really focus on two primary areas. One is to help market, and the other one is to help monetize primarily podcasts. And because those are really the two biggest pain points. How do I grow my audience? How do I grow my impact, my listeners? And then on the other side of that, how do I actually make money off of this? And really, even for the most podcasters, they're losing money by the time they count for their time and they count into the effort they're putting in to promote and produce and just all of that
Right.
goes around with it. And so that's a problem. So what I want to do is come up with a product to help solve that. And the way it does it is we have lots of tools and templates and systems and trainings that help you understand how to make profitable your podcast and actually the tools to execute on it.
Awesome. That's so important. And because, so many of us, many times we start off doing our own everything on that podcast. So and we don't know what everything is until we get into it,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So what are some of those everything that have to happen to have a successful podcast? What are some of the steps involved, the things that take
Sure.
place?
Well, at the very basic level, you want to have great value. And so people understand that from different perspectives. But what I always teach is there's always an exchange. And so, even right now, what's the exchange? Well, I'm hopefully giving valuable content in exchange for people's attention. So that's an
Right.
exchange. And you want the value you're providing to be greater. So that's the first thing the podcaster has to think about is what is my content? Is it, does it have any kind of continuity? It also has to be consistent because you can't be doing 10 episodes here and then disappear for a month. You want to have consistency. So those are kind of the base things. And then beyond that, it's like, okay, how's it edited? How's it produced? Those are all great things. But that's not really going to matter much if nobody's listening to it, which kind of circles back to my other 2 points. Like, how do I actually, make it where I'm getting listeners and growing? And then the other part, how do I make it profitable? And why is profitability important? The reason why it's important is because industry wide, there's this term called pod fade. So a lot of people will start their podcast and then they quit. And the reason why they
Mm,
quit is they just lose momentum. They lose kind of the drive. I believe if their podcast is profitable, and profitable can mean different things. It doesn't necessarily have to mean money. It
yeah,
could be,
let's talk about that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, profitability is yes, money is certainly part of it because you have to pay, even if you have a nonprofit or you're just doing it as a charity work or something, you still have to cover your costs for the hosting of it and all the administrative needs. And so we want to at least make sure that's covered. But beyond that, people want to grow in their listenership. That usually takes money to do that. At some level, or time or effort, there's in some way, there's a cost there. And then the other part, of course, is making sure that you have the ability to uh, stay engaged with it, right? So if you're not staying engaged with it, you're gonna fade out. And so that's why podcasting properly is so important.
Right. Right. And uh, what are some of the elements of that monetization? You said there's multiple ways to look at monetization. Um, and you mentioned earlier sponsorships and joint ventures,
Yes.
that kind of thing. So if I have a podcast, obviously I do, but if I have a podcast and I want to monetize it, what are some of those steps that I need to take?
Well, again, it depends on the model you want to use, and some people use all three. But say, for instance, one of the most popular models is I have a podcast and I want to sell my own products and services. Well, in that
Correct.
case, you want to act essentially as your own sponsor. So you want to
Right.
have your own product mentioned throughout the show. And typically, this is kind of borrowed from traditional media days, but you have a pre-roll, which is where
Right.
ad is played beforehand, and then mid roll, which is midway, and then post roll, which is guess what, at the end. And so those are kind of the three kind of standard ways to do it. The other model within that, of course, is there's a bunch of them. One I really like is interviewing your ideal prospect. So if you have a
Right.
business and say you're a consultant, a great thing to do is to interview those folks. Another thing you can do is interview potential joint venture partners. So in other words, you don't have to directly monetize the audience. You can monetize or partner with the individuals you have in your show, which that gets right into co-marketing and joint ventures and everything else.
Right. Right. So, yeah, and that's so important. So important. Let's go back to the software. How
Yeah.
does the software help that podcaster who wants to monetize
Yeah,
their
yeah.
their show?
So, really, what I found over the years is communication is key. So, if you can't communicate your value, other people won't be able to understand it or receive it.
Yeah.
And so, we have a whole roadmap of over 100 tools and systems we're going to provide the podcasting community. But where we're starting at today is with something very simple, which is called Media Kit. And so, a Media Kit can be used many different ways. So, within the platform, the first Media Kit we have is for guest, actually, for to be a guest on someone else's podcast. That's usually,
Okay.
sometimes it's called one sheet. From a podcast perspective, we have media kits that will help you get sponsors. And so if you can imagine, what I always like to think about is when you want to approach a market, the best thing you do is think about, okay, what does the market want? So if you want to sell
Mm,
sponsorships, probably a good place to start is saying, okay, what does a sponsor want? Like, what are their
right,
goals? That's ultimately the most important thing. So they want to, maybe increase market share. Maybe they want to target a certain audience. Maybe they want to influence a group of people. Certainly they want to get leads and sales. I mean, so there's a lot of criteria they have. But how do they understand? Like, how do they judge you? That's the other thing. Like, okay, what do they want? And then the other
right,
question you want to think about is what is the criteria they have? And so they want to know things like who's your audience. They want to know things like what's your show about, who's been on the show in the past, what other sponsors have you had. It's almost like a resume you want to provide to us.
right.
And most people traditionally, maybe it's been a PowerPoint, maybe it's been a spreadsheet. If they know a little about how to program or build a website, maybe it's a page on the website. But the problem with that is it's not easy to customize. You can't change it per sponsor. It's not mobile friendly. There's a whole list of problems with it. Not to mention it's kind of laborious because there's no system behind it. It's just you have to make it up as you go. So that's why I said, okay, why not create software to solve that problem? Because I was doing my own virtual summits and podcasts, and it was difficult to create my own media kit. So I said, why not create software that will automate that process and make it very easy to share
Hmm.
with sponsors?
Very good. How does you listed off a bunch of things that you need to know about that sponsor?
Yeah.
How does one go about getting that information? How does that research, what does that research look like? Where do we go to find out the answers to those questions?
For the sponsor, what they're looking for?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yes.
it depends on where you're at, but I mean, the most obvious thing to do is when you have a call with a prospect, is you ask them. That I mean, it sounds kind of obvious, but that's probably a first place to start if you actually get them
That's a
on the
great,
phone. And well,
that's a great answer, Tony.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the easiest thing to know because then you really
Yeah,
know. And so part of your sales process, which I teach some of this within, it's basic sales. You can learn this from a lot of people,
yeah.
but not tailored to this market. So I'm creating trainings around this, in fact. But that's the first place to start. Beyond that, you might want to look at, okay, what other shows have they sponsored? What other kind of media in general? So they've done
Ah,
digital advertising somewhere, maybe banner ads, search terms. What kind of language are they using? A good thing to do is also look at kind of like I would set up a Google alert if it's a bigger sponsor and you're very serious about it, because with that you can kind of know what new initiatives they have because there's something called a trigger. So a trigger is what is the impetus behind needing a sponsorship to do something. So maybe they're launching a new
mm,
facility, maybe they have a new product launch, maybe they have a new book. These are all
ah,
triggers that drive action. And a lot of times there's a result from that. And so these are all good triggers that you should be aware of when you're having the conversation. So if it's a good side, I mean, if it's $100 sponsor, probably not worth it. If it's $100,000 sponsor, you do a lot. So it really depends on where they're at in the continuum. The bigger
right,
the opportunity, the more research you want to do.
right. Wow. Yeah, lots of thoughts there. Um, now that we know the how to do that research, how important is it then? You said like the with the $100 sponsorship versus that larger one. Even on those smaller sponsorships, because some folks, if they're just starting out, that may be those larger sponsors may be beyond their ability to even um, think of, to think about,
Yeah.
their risk level. Um, So yeah, and the reason I was asking that is I think so oftentimes we tend to just jump in, just jump in with both feet and do something, and we forget about the research.
Yeah.
How important is it for us to do that research?
Yeah. Again, the larger the opportunity, the more important. But here's kind of a shortcut. So say for instance, you're just starting out and you have 0 listeners. You can still get sponsors. In fact, one of my kind of friends, I'll say friends because he does give me some advice. But what he had his because he's not in official capacity yet. That's why I'm saying that. But
Yeah.
what he monetized his show before he even aired. And so how do you do that? Well, what I would suggest, and say you don't have a lot of contacts or anything like that. Well, what I would do if I was starting from scratch, I would probably come up with, again, my ideal list of sponsors or people I want to collaborate with, have them on my show. And guess what? As you interview them, you can naturally ask those questions. That becomes kind of the foundation. So you can kind of kill two birds with
Ah,
one stone. You can interview them, ask these questions naturally. You get honest answers, obviously, and then you take that information, and that becomes a sponsorship opportunity. And you want to think
wow.
about, okay, why would they want to sponsor you? Going back to kind of point one, well, they probably want to increase their audience. They want to probably increase their impact and probably their income or revenue generated from this. And so they're already on your show for that purpose. And so what the sponsorship can do is simply extend that. And what you could do is out of the gate, not make money on it, right? So maybe your goal is not to make a profit yet. Your goal may be to grow your audience so you can get bigger
Right.
sponsors. And so what you
Right.
simply say is, hey, how about we take this video and let me extend the visibility of it. Maybe I can do some Facebook ads at my cost. All I ask is you maybe contribute $100, and we'll put that towards the advertising. You grow your audience, more people hear your message you're already trying to get out there, and I'll grow my audience because I can get it out there. You do an ad campaign, and then you take that, and then you grow, and then you then funnel it. And so before you know it, you have a flywheel going, almost like if you read Good to Great. You get
Right.
the momentum, because that's, again, going back to my very first point about pod fade, why people kind of fade out. They don't have any momentum. So if
Right.
you're making some money, if you're growing your listeners, if you're having great conversations, you get the flywheel going, you're more likely to stick with it and have success.
Yes. Yes. Awesome. And so that is in a way a joint venture then, isn't it? If they're
Well, it is in
contributing
a
that
sense. Well,
way, a little
there's
bit
different.
of a joint venture.
Yeah, I mean, from a joint venture, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I tend to coin that a sponsorship because they're paying you to do it.
Right.
It would also probably follow what I fall under the category of what I call co-marketing. And so that is a very common thing you see in the corporate world. Unfortunately, it's
Right.
just not done for small business. And so, look no further than McDonald's. McDonald's, there's a movie
Right.
coming out. They have the Happy Meals. It's branded for for the movie that's coming out. They sell toys. It's a true joint venture. They both grow,
Right.
and that would be a co-marketing. And podcasting is perfect for that because you're both on the show. You share it, I share it, everybody grows.
Fantastic. Give us some other examples, if you would, of joint venturing, which is, truly collaboration conversations. What does that look like in the podcast world, joint venturing?
Oh gosh, there's so many things. I do it myself all the time, but this might be, maybe, for instance, I have new courses coming out, and that complement the software. And so I might go to you and say, hey, I have this course. How about you promote it? You promote your show. Someone buys the course, we'll split the revenue. And so that's a very simple joint venture. Some joint ventures can be much more complex. That could have a lot more um, facets to it. And so what would that look like? Well, what I always teach people to do is when they're starting a show, to take an inventory of their assets. And to me, if you're growing a business, you should be growing your assets as well, because God forbid you get hit by the proverbial bus. What's left? There's a
Right.
lot of times most people have a job, they don't actually have a business because there's no assets
Yes.
tied to it. And so
Right.
from a podcasting perspective, what are those assets? Well, the first asset is your properties. So, what's a property? A property is certainly a podcast. It might be a website, could be a blog, could be a book. Then within that, you have really the content that goes within that. So, from a podcast perspective, you have episodes. Book, you have chapters. Website or blog, you have posts. And then finally, the third category of assets is your list. So email lists, contact lists, retargeting lists. And so what you can do is you can take these three entities, your properties, your lists, and your content, and you can mix and match those in different ways to do a much more complex joint venture. So you might say, yes,
Mm,
I'm going to promote you on the podcast, but in addition, I'm also going to do a blog. I'm also going to do a LinkedIn Live like we're doing here. It could be a variety of things. And the more things you add to it, obviously, the more complexity. Hence, kind of going back to what I mentioned before, why you need some sort of media kit to organize all this. So whether you're doing a
Yeah.
sponsorship or whether you're doing a joint venture, that's where the media kit comes in play. And in fact, our next quarter, we're going to be launching a joint venture media kit.
Oh, nice. Nice. So what tools are within the software currently to help manage all of this, not just the media kit, but to help manage these relationships? Is there anything in the software that helps with that?
Yeah. There's a basic CRM to kind of track, okay, who am I talking to? What's the
Okay.
revenue share, for instance? What offer? So if you're like me and you have literally hundreds of offers, which of course
Right.
isn't for everybody. I've been doing this for 20 something years, but maybe you have two or three. It still gets hard to manage once you do a bunch of podcasts. Which offer did I have on which one, and what was the offer
Yeah.
code? If you have a tracking system, like which one gets what, and so there's a system we have within that. And then even at a most
Good.
basic level, one thing that I find people don't really understand is how to create an offer. And so within the system, there's trainings and there's also software that walks you through step by step through a wizard how to create an offer. So what is the structure
Oh,
of the offer?
nice.
How to make sure the offer is promoted? How do I make sure people can actually redeem the offer? All those kind of questions and tools are available within the system.
Wonderful. I haven't had a chance to look at that part of it yet. I've got to get in there and look at that,
Yeah,
Tony.
sure.
You inspire me here to do what I need to do.
Awesome.
Fantastic. What are the things that can you think of that we haven't talked about yet in terms of the software to help people have these collaborative conversations, these and create these collaborations? What else does the software assist with?
Well,
Have
one
we
of the
missed
challenges,
anything?
and yeah, one of the things you hit on is like, okay, how do I find sponsors? How do I find joint venture partners? And so, you might have this great offer, but if you can't find the partners to promote it, that's a
Yeah,
problem. Or if you're a show, like, how do you find the people that have the offer? So it's a problem on both sides. And so within the system, there's a directory. And really, it's almost like a marketplace
nice.
where you can find sponsors, where you can find joint venture partners that you can then invite onto your show and collaborate. And so, what we wanted to do is kind of make easy way for people to joint venture through their show, but not go the route of a lot of other systems where it's basically matchmaking. You get the guest, you get the host, it puts them together. Those are great, especially if you're trying to get out there and start, getting exposure, get your feet
Right,
with how to interview. But the problem is they're not really great for creating collaborations. And so that's what the
right,
software is really focused on, is matching podcast hosts and guests and sponsors to do deals where it's more of an income and profit,
love
focused
it,
marketplace.
love it. Okay, so now let's put on our hat of I want to be that guest on other people's shows. I don't really want the hassle of doing my own podcast. I want to just be a guest. So walk me through how a person who just wants to be a guest utilizes the software.
Yeah, so it goes back to the same question I mentioned for getting sponsors, and you start with them as opposed to you. So you might want to ask the question, okay, if I want to be a guest on a show, like, what are they looking for? And so there's a lot of typical things you might have heard before: know, like, trust. So they want to know who you are, what's your background, what's your biography, are you likable? What kind of stories can you tell? Are you trusted? What kind of social proof do you have? Have you done other interviews before? Do you have case studies? Do you have a history? Do you have success? But beyond that, they want to look for other things like, okay, what kind of value are you going to provide? That a lot of times comes down to the topics and questions you address and making sure they're relevant for
Right.
the show. And finally, they're looking for collaboration opportunities. So
Yes.
then the question becomes, okay, I have all this stuff. How do I communicate this to the host, and how do I make it easy for the host to get all this stuff? Like, they're not going to want
Right.
to spend hours researching all this. That is exactly where the guest media kit or podcast one sheet comes into play, because it has all that on a silver platter. You give it to the host, and it's great. Some hosts don't pick guests based on that. Sometimes they pick it through other means, maybe
Right.
it's through relationships or community. But even in that case, a media kit is still extremely helpful, because a lot of times they ask for your headshot because they want to market the show, and they also
Right.
want to have your bio or your podcast intro so they can introduce you without having to do all the research themselves. So the
Right. Right.
media kit is super helpful because again, it's a communication device that can be used many ways. It can also be used to generate referrals. So after an interview, I might say, hey, I hope you enjoyed my interview. Was it good? Yeah, you had great value. Wonderful interview. Great. Do you have any friends, other podcasters? Because podcasters tend to know podcasters. Where you think I might
Yeah.
be a great fit, a great guest? Yeah, I do. Would you mind, doing an intro and maybe including my one sheet so they can see who I am? Boom. So it can be used
Fantastic.
in a very multifaceted way.
That's awesome. I currently do a lot of introductions. I'm becoming quite the connector.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I currently do is I will grab the person's LinkedIn link. And so when I make the introduction, I do it by email. And, John, here's Joe, here's Joe's LinkedIn profile. Joe, here's John, here's John's LinkedIn profile. So it would be great to be able to replace that, or maybe add to that
Yeah.
the one sheet.
Yeah, because
That
they're
would
two
be a
different purposes.
tremendous service that people could do for the people that they are connecting with, is to send them there to Castosity to create their one sheet, their media kit,
Yeah.
and then be able to utilize that in connecting with people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, LinkedIn profiles are great, but they're more kind of job related and they're more related to kind of work they might do. Maybe not
Right,
so much for collaboration. So, for instance, like how is that different? Well, say for instance, hey, Tony's got a new book that came out. He'd love you to kind of learn about it. Not really a appropriate place to put it in LinkedIn. You can of course list your book, but not from
right.
a conference perspective. You can't say, okay,
Yeah,
here's the book, here's what the affiliate arrangement is. They're giving 40%.
right,
That kind of
right,
information isn't
right.
available. All you get is the fact that they have a book coming out or a
Yeah,
course or I don't even
right.
know where you can promote software. I mean, you can add links, but you can't say. So, in other words, if you're looking to do joint ventures or affiliate marketing or partnerships with
Yeah,
with the podcast host, our platform Casasi is much better for that than really
yeah,
because that's what it's built for, specifically for that purpose.
right. I love that. I hadn't thought about that. And really bumping that up to a level of, yeah, this is what, and I do, when I have a podcast guest, I have them complete a registration form, if you will, giving the information for the show notes and their social media connections and all of that stuff. But it would be great to just add another line to that and say, go create your media kit on Castosity and submit your media kit to me.
Yeah, well, actually, I haven't even mentioned this yet,
And
but one of the things we're coming out with next year is a booking tool. And so what I'll do is take all your
awesome.
custom questions, add it to our system, and what happens is you can actually replace your form and replace it
With
with
your
this.
system completely.
Yeah, and what it'll do is it'll still ask the same questions, redirect them to a calendar link. But the benefit is having a guest on your show, they automatically get a one sheet for free. So you're adding value
Right.
to that guest just for them being on your show. So it just increases your kind of
Fantastic.
authority.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really like this, Tony. I like the direction this is going. This
Oh,
is
thank you,
awesome.
thank you.
Yeah, this is great. Wow. So folks, you see my wheels turning here. So, okay, yeah, so next year, a customized booking tool that would do all of that. And so are we able to customize then that tool? I mean, will we be able to go to it and say, okay, I need it to have this, 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 and this in it? Is that
Yeah,
kind of the way it's
so
going to lay out?
yeah, you can change all the questions. So you can have, well, a lot of times we have default questions, like where are your top three topics, questions, etc.
Right.
But beyond that, if you want to ask another custom question, like what's your
Yeah.
favorite book, whatever that
Right.
is, you can add those in there. And then
Yeah.
what's really nice is you can customize that landing page. Because to me,
Right.
having been in marketing for so long, personal branding and branding in general is very important. So you can change the layout of it, you can change the colors, you can change the font,
Fantastic.
you can add your logo, you can add your headshot, whatever you want. So it's really tailored to you. And so it's a much better experience as opposed to just sending them to some random form.
Now, when you and I first started talking about Castosity about a year ago,
Yeah.
one of the things that I remember we talked about was the possibility or the potential for it to actually have marketing things where is that a part of it now, or is that going to be something in the future where there would actually be some market pieces that you could download to promote that show?
Yes, yeah. So what we do is every quarter we release a new tool, and the roadmap is
Okay.
to do 100 tools in the next 5 years. So every
Wow.
quarter we're releasing a new tool. Right now we've released the guest version of it. We now have an agency version coming out. So if you have a podcast booking agency, we can help with that, or a podcast production company. And then
Wow.
this quarter, we're releasing the sponsorship version, which we're talking about now. Next quarter, we'll be releasing the marketing kit and the JV
Okay.
kits. Well, not next quarter, but every quarter one, it'll be the marketing kit, and after that, the joint venture kit.
Okay. Q1 2023 will be the marketing kit.
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about what that looks like, what that will do.
Yeah, so one of the biggest pain points I've realized is a lot of times, as a guest, let's just say as a guest, you did a great interview, you're excited about it, you don't hear from the host for 3 months, then all of a sudden you get a random email that says, "Hey, guess what? Your show is live."
Right.
No prep, no notice. Maybe if you're
Yeah.
lucky, there'll be a link to the actual show. Even if you're
Right.
more lucky, there'll be like maybe a audiogram or something. And so
Right.
it's not very structured or organized. It doesn't really work well. And so that was another problem I've experienced myself. And I said, okay, we can solve this problem. And so what it has is it's basically a portal. So instead of sending someone to Google Drive or sending someone to like an attachment to an email, it has all the marketing assets necessary to promote the show in one place. So imagine
Love
if
it.
you could have the banner ads to promote it. Imagine if there was then email copy, social media copy, a schedule when the guest should promote it, a link right there to share it, and also maybe a link to review it. So that's all in one place. But what would be even cooler is, hey, what if there's a little button there and said, would you like us to promote these your show even more? And that's where they click the button. It goes right into your sponsorship package, and maybe they give you that $100 we talked about earlier to then promote it.
Okay.
It gets more exposure for you in the show. So that's kind of
Wow.
where we're going. So it's all these systems are interconnected. In other words.
I love it. I love it. Yes, I'm excited about that. You must keep me posted about
Yeah,
that.
that one's going to be kind of as we go. We're doing the easier ones first, and the ones that we think
Sure.
will kind of be adopted quickly. But the media kit I'm probably most excited about is the marketing one.
That's fantastic. Yeah, we'll have to have you back on either the podcast or here when you're ready to launch that and update folks on that. So let's talk about an event that you've got coming up fairly quickly here, Tony.
Yes.
A podcast workshop. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I have a workshop that really shows 3 ways to grow your audience, income, and impact. I mean, one thing I didn't talk about earlier is the importance of impact. So maybe, like for me, I have a mission to make podcasting profitable. So I want to make a real impact in people's lives. And so this workshop is all about how to do those 3 things: grow your audience, grow your income, and grow your impact. And that's what we're going to be talking about. And this audience that we're serving for this particularly is for people that want to be guests on podcasts. But the principles apply for hosts or guests. In fact, if you're a host, you really should be doing podcast guest interviews. And so
Yes.
it's really for anybody. It's particularly helpful for authors, coaches. Maybe if you have a new product coming out, software companies. These are all people that want to get involved and really do more with podcast guest interviews.
Okay. Awesome. And so we have a date for that, right?
Yes, I think it's October, was it 27th, I think?
October the 27th at 2 p.m.
Yes,
Central Time,
correct.
right? And let's see, do we have a link for that, don't we?
Yes, we
Is
do. It's
yes.
podcast guest interviews / Regina.
Awesome. And that'll be where they'll register for it and then they'll get the information on how
Correct,
to
correct.
participate.
Yeah. As far
Awesome.
as I know, it's not live today. But if
Okay.
someone is listening to this like right this minute, because I know this is live, just give me a message and I'll make sure you get
Okay.
put on there. just
Awesome.
message me right through LinkedIn would probably be the best place.
Fantastic. And that was, again, that was podcastguestinterviews.com/Regina
Correct.
/Regina. Is that
Correct.
right? Okay. I was looking for it in my notes there and I couldn't find it. Awesome. Yeah, so be sure and put that on your calendar, October 27th at 2 p.m. And Tony will be doing a workshop on 3 ways to grow your audience, your income, and your impact through podcasting. And particularly if you want to be a guest on someone's podcast, you want to show up. But if you're a host, and sometimes we want to be both. I'm a host of a podcast, but I also like being a guest on other people's podcasts. So
Yeah.
as Tony said, it's for everyone. Be sure and come. This is a way to learn more about how to get your message out there, how to make a bigger impact in the world, and monetize it in the process. So be sure and put that on your calendar. And again, tell us that link one more time, Tony.
Yeah. So it's podcastguestinterviews.com/Regina.
And it is interviews plural. There's
Yeah.
an S on the end of interview. Very good.
Yes.
And so, Tony, this has been great. What great information. And I've when I booked us for this, I wasn't even thinking, that podcast is kind of the ultimate level of collaboration, right? And so
Yeah.
this is just absolutely perfect for what we want to do on this show. So thank you so much. I appreciate you being here and sharing your wealth of knowledge. And so excited, as you know, I have been for a year,
Yeah. Yeah.
knowing that this was coming. Good
Take a
things
little
take
time.
time, folks, and they're worth waiting for.
Yes.
So, yeah. So, folks, Tony, how can folks reach out to you if they want to get in touch with you? What's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. So probably the best way is go to my personal website because all my contact information is right there. And it has
Okay.
links to all the software as well. So to get to that, you go to Tony, or I'm sorry, yeah, meettonyg.com. So
MeetTonyG.com.
meettonyg.com. Yeah.
Awesome. MeetTonyG.com. I'm going to put that down. MeetTonyG.com. There you have it, folks. MeetTonyG.com. Be sure to go out, check it out. Reach out to him. Go check out the software. Register for the workshop coming up on the 27th. And if you have any questions, be sure and put them in the comments, and Tony or I, whoever it's addressed to, we will answer. Oh, we had some comments here that I didn't notice as we were going along.
Okay, sure.
Cody Hill said, if you're launching a podcast, how do you recommend securing sponsors when you don't have any KPIs?
Yeah, so what I would do is build value around everything beyond the show, because if you don't have those benchmarks yet, what you want to do is understand this goes back to those three foundational assets, right? Your properties, your content, and then your lists. And so, you may have 0 downloads, but if you have 1 million followers on Instagram, it's probably worth something. Do you have a blog? What's the value of that? And so what you want to do is kind of start small if that's the situation where you have nothing, but you can use the method I just shared. You can leverage, even if you don't, everyone has something. So even if you don't have any followers, maybe you have connections to people. So you might be able to do introductions, to prominent people. There's always something you can start with just to get the guests on your show, which will get you momentum. But what I would suggest doing, one of the first things you probably want to do is build a podcast website, which I didn't mention this, but I have a company that does that as well. If you're interested in that, it's called podcastingresults.com. But anyway, that's what you probably want to have initially, is some kind of foundation, whether it's a blog, whether it's a website, but you want to have an asset that you can use. And the reason why is you can take that website and do a blog post on it, which is a summary of it. It gives you a place to put an ad from the sponsor. It gives you a place to put a link. So it gives you a way to really add more value, because it's really the concept of sponsorships that I've developed is present unique value. So the first thing you want to think about is what value you're providing, and you do that by looking at those assets. And then the next thing you want to do is make sure it's presented well, so which is where the media kit comes in play. And then it's got to be unique, and your combination of these assets is really what makes it unique. And one of the things I'll be doing, I'm not sure when, but I'll make sure that Regina knows, but I'm going to do a workshop for sponsors. Like, how do you get your first sponsors and what do you
Oh,
provide?
yay.
So I will. So Cody, reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'll make sure I get you on that list when we do that workshop.
Fantastic. And we've had your meettonyg.com going across, and we now have also the link to register for the upcoming workshop on the 27th. And also, Cody said, great info, exclamation point. So
Oh, good. I'm
thank you,
glad
Cody.
I'm able to help.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for being here, Tony. As always, you deliver. Appreciate it so much. And I'm very excited, as you know, about this software and what it can do for podcasters, uh, for people who want to consume podcasts, because then we have more successful podcasters out there through these tools and can give that information for people to be able to consume. So thank you again. And we'll see you again. I know.
Yeah,
We
every
do this
time I launch
again.
something, I'll let you know. That way you can share with your audience. And
Sounds great.
and
Love
again,
it.
thank you so much. I
Love it.
appreciate
You
that
bet.
time today.
And thanks for joining us again, folks, on Collaboration Conversations. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.